No Country for Old Men is a 2007 American neo-Western crime thriller film written and directed by Joel and Ethan Coen, based on Cormac McCarthy's 2005 novel of the same name. Along a desert highway, Anton Chigurh, Javier Bardem, is arrested by a deputy, Zach Hopkins. They return to the empty police station, where the deputy calls Sheriff Bell. He tells the sheriff about an odd device in Chigurh's possession, a captive bolt pistol. The deputy thinks it may be an oxygen tank, but it is actually a device used to kill cattle in the slaughterhouse. The deputy has his back to Chigurh, who sneaks up behind him and just as the deputy hangs up the phone, uses the handcuff chain to garrote the deputy. After cleaning himself up in the station bathroom, Chigurh steals a squad car and once on a desert highway, uses the car's lights and siren to stop a random motorist, Chip Love, driving a Ford sedan. He politely asks the man to step out of the car. Chigurh then asks the man to hold still and presses the captive bolt pistol attached to the compressed air tank against the puzzled driver's forehead. He squeezes the trigger and it fires the bolt into the man's skull, killing him. Chigurh drives off in the man's car. Elsewhere in the desert, Llewellyn Moss, Josh Brolin, is hunting pronghorns. Setting the sights of his hunting rifle on one, he fires, scattering the animals. Walking to where the herd stood, he notices a trail of blood. Realizing the pronghorn left in a different direction from the blood trail, he spies a wounded pit bull hobbling away. Retracing the dog's trail, Moss eventually comes upon several pickup trucks parked in the middle of the wilderness. Mexican criminals and pit bulls lie dead on the ground. Only a mortally wounded driver remains alive. Moss tracks the only criminal to have escaped the shootout to a tree where he finds the man has died. He finds a large catalog case filled with $2 million and a .45 caliber pistol. He takes the money and gun. He returns home where he hides the submachine gun under his mobile home. His wife Carla Jean, Kelly MacDonald, is irritated that he has been gone all day and he refuses to tell her where he found the pistol and catalog case. She asks him what's in the case but doesn't believe him when he offhandedly tells her it's full of money. That night, Moss guiltily wakes up, deciding that he should take water to the wounded driver. He arrives around dawn and parks a short distance away on a rise. He carries a gallon of water to the scene of the shootout, but discovers that the wounded man has been killed by a shotgun round to his head. Two men in a truck pursue him, but he escapes into a river. Reaching home, he sends his wife, Carla Jean, to stay with her mother, then drives to a motel in Del Rio, where he hides the briefcase in his room's air duct. After filling up at a gas station in the dead man's Ford, Chigurh goes to pay for some candy from the gas proprietor, Gene Jones. The proprietor tries to make polite conversation out of simple friendliness, but Chigurh is upset at the inane small talk, and the owner finds himself in a strange, tense confrontation. The man is genuinely perplexed by his customer's anxiety, and tries to defuse the argument by saying he needs to close the station, which only further irritates Chigurh due to it being still midday. Chigurh requires him to call the flip of coin to decide whether the man is to win everything, apparently whether the man will live or die. The clerk guesses heads and Chigurh gives the man the coin. He tells him not to mix it with any other coins. Later that night, two well-dressed men take Chigurh to the site of the failed drug deal. He removes the VIN tag from Moss's truck door and examines the corpses. Chigurh picks up a pistol laying next to one dead man and kills both of them. The following morning, Sheriff Bell, Tommy Lee Jones, and Deputy Wendell, Garrett Dillahunt, respond to a report of a burning car, and recognize the Ford belonging to the dead motorist. They follow tire tracks to the shootout site, where Sheriff Bell recognizes Moss's truck. He and Wendell carefully look over the scene and then decide to call in federal authorities. The heroin is gone from the back of the pickup. Chigurh appears at Moss and Carla Jean's trailer and uses the captive bolt pistol to break the lock. The trailer is empty but hurriedly vacated, but he finds in the unopened mail a phone bill that reveals the couple has made a lot of calls to Odessa, TX. Moss puts his wife on a bus and reassures her that he will call her in a couple of days. Moss takes a cab back to his motel but a truck parked near his room makes him suspicious and he directs the driver to take him to another motel. Chigurh meanwhile calls numbers on the phone bill to try to figure out where Moss is headed. He then begins driving, trying to anticipate where Moss is headed. Shagur is driving past the motel when the tracking device goes off. He finds the motel, and by the frequency of its beeping he deduces which room the signal is coming from, Moss's first room. Shagur finds 3 Mexicans in the room and kills them with a suppressed shotgun. The Mexicans' gunfire alerts Moss in the opposite room. Shagur searches the room for the case, finally noticing the HVAC duct. He opens it to see the tracks where the case was dragged. Moss escapes into the dark with the money and hitchhikes out of the area. In a border town, Moss rents a room in an older, run-down multi-story hotel. Unable to sleep, he is apparently trying to figure out how Shagur tracked him down to the previous motel. He searches the case and finds the transponder that Shagur has been using to find him. Shagur shoots out the lock with the captive bolt pistol, hitting Moss, who fires his shotgun into the door. Moss then drops the case out the second-story window and follows it. Shagur shoots at him from the window but misses. Moss is wounded in the side by the door lock. He hides behind a nearby car, watching in a store window for whoever is following him. He shoots and wounds Shagur. Sheriff Bell continues to be disturbed by what he saw in the desert and the apparently deteriorating state of morals in the world. He goes to visit Carla Jean in Odessa and asks her to put him in touch with her husband. The next day, in a high-rise office building in Dallas, a bounty hunter named Carson Wells, Woody Harrelson, arrives in a businessman's, Stephen Root, large office. The businessman is upset about the many killings perpetrated by Shagur. He wants Wells to contain the situation. Carson visits Moss in the Mexican hospital and suggests that he just hand over the money so Carson can protect him. Moss refuses and Carson tells him in which hotel he is staying. On the way back across the border, Carson sees the catalog case from the bridge. Back at his hotel, the same one at which Moss was staying, Carson is confronted by Shagur. Carson tries to strike a deal with Shagur for his life, but when the phone rings, Shagur kills him. Moss is on the phone, and Shagur tells him that if he brings him the money, he won't kill his wife, though he can't do the same for Moss. Shagur lets Moss know that he knows exactly where he is and, instead of coming to kill him in the hospital, he is going to go to Carla Jean's mother's house. He calls Carla Jean at her mother's in Odessa and tells her to fly to El Paso to meet him. Shagur meanwhile goes to Dallas where he kills the businessman for hiring not only Carson but the Mexicans as well. The Mexicans who have been watching Carla Jean in Odessa follow her and her mother, Beth Grant, to the airport. One of the Mexicans helps her mother with her luggage and she tells him she and Carla Jean are going to El Paso. In the airport, Carla Jean calls Sheriff Bell and tells him where Moss is staying in El Paso. Sheriff Bell is driving up to Moss's motel when he sees a large number of empty shell casings on the ground by the pool, where a woman is floating dead. He then sees Llewellyn Moss dead in the open doorway of his room. The money case is missing. All Sheriff Bell can do is comfort Carla Jean when she arrives. Later that night, Sheriff Bell and the local sheriff, Roger Boyce, have coffee and bemoan the declining morals of American society. Afterward, Sheriff Bell returns to the motel and nearly misses being killed by Shagur, who had been searching the room for the money case. Sheriff Bell visits his uncle, Ellis, Barry Corbin, to tell him he's retiring because he is too disturbed by the violence he's seen. Ellis tells him he's being vain and relates the story about how Sheriff Bell's grandfather had died. Meanwhile, Shagur visits Carla Jean, who has just buried her mother. She understands why he's there but still finds it meaningless. Shagur flips a coin but Carla Jean refuses to play his game. Carla Jean dismisses Shagur's game, saying that he's the one who decides on whether or not to kill her, not the coin. Shagur leaves the house and stops to check his boots, apparently for blood. Driving off, he's struck broadside by a car speeding through the intersection. Shagur gets out of his car, his arm bone protruding out of his elbow. The two neighborhood boys come up to him to see if he's all right. Shagur pays one of the kids for his shirt, which he uses to make a sling for his arm, and he asks them to tell the authorities that he had already left. Shagur limps away down the street. At Sheriff Bell's house, the sheriff ponders what to do for the day at breakfast with his wife, Loretta, Tess Harper. He is restless in retirement, but she rebuffs his offer to help out around the house. He recounts a dream he had about his sheriff father. Bell dreamed that he and his father were riding a mountain pass in the night. His father, carrying a horn with embers inside that glowed like moonlight, rode ahead into the darkness and disappeared. Though he couldn't see anything in the dark night, Bell dreamed that he kept riding forward since his father would have a warm fire waiting for him.